You are listening to Eastmans Fly Cast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastmans Fly Cast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have back on my buddy Dillon Ness. So I just had on Dillon a couple weeks ago, but he's one of my favorite people. I love teaming up with him, and I love recapping these spring adventures. So in the interim of releasing that last podcast, me and Dillon put together another trip, and it was epic. We fished a few of my local rivers. We got them real good. We saw big fish, rainbows, browns. And so I wanted to do another spring recap, but this time focus on nymphing tactics. So nymphing can get kind of a bad rap, but it's the most efficient and effective way to consistently catch trout, and it's just a good skill set to have in your toolbox. So Dillon's the perfect guest for it. Like I say, he's always fired up and ready to go fishing, and we get to recap this trip, get excited about that, but also talk in depth about nymph fishing and leader lengths and the bugs we like to use and weight and reading water. And so it just made for a great conversation that can make all of us better fly fishermen. I really enjoy it. Like I say, I always enjoy hanging out with this guy or chatting on the phone. And so I'm sure there'll be many more podcasts to come. So this week we have Dillon Ness again, just like last week, but it made for a great recording. I really enjoyed it. I think you guys will enjoy it too.
What's going on?
Hey, what's happening?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just sipping on some coffee. It is cold here.
Oh, I know. It's bitter cold here, too. That north wind has just been brutal, dude. It's like, it's been 30 degrees, but I'm sure it's well below zero with that north wind. It's just gnarly.
Oh, yeah. And it's been ripping here, too, for the last few days. And it's just like, God dang, bring the sunshine back out. But it is what it is, I guess. Shit, we went, I took my father-in-law fishing on the Stillwater yesterday. Dude, it was so good.
Was it?
Oh, my gosh. There was no one around. And the wind, it's kind of tucked down. The spot that I like to go to is tucked down. Oh, my gosh. Nymphing was, like, stupid. He had never fly fished before. And, he wrecked him. It was so sweet.
Oh, how cool. Yeah, so you got your wife's father out fly fishing, talked him into it. Does he live in your area?
No, he's from Oregon.
Okay, that's right. I knew
Oregon.
that. Okay, so he was up visiting, and he said, "Hey, let's go fishing for the day," and then took him to your spot, and then just got him on nymphs, huh?
Oh, dude, got him so good. The Pat's rubber leg and like any nymph trailing that, and he stroked him. It was so much fun. It's so wild. I'd never seen somebody so like just take to fly fishing so fast that had never touched a fly rod in their life. It was awesome.
You know, sometimes it's better when they don't have fly rod experience, when you can just teach everything the right way from the beginning. They turn into really good fly anglers because they don't have to make all the mistakes and learn the hard way and break habits like you and I do when we take up something new. I was like, man, when I took up spay rod fishing for the first time, I had so much single hand fly rod experience that my brain just could not work with that spay rod. It was like the most difficult thing for me to get my timing and to be able to use two hands just because I had that muscle memory of a single hand rod. So, man, sometimes that's better.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and it helps too that he's fished his whole life, you know what I mean? So it's like he's savvy to the game, and so like he understood like, okay, I need these bugs to drift free, you know, and then, you know, watching an indicator, like whenever that thing budged, it was like, yep. Yeah. And so it's like, what was surprising is like, you know, a lot of new people to fly fishing, and especially when you're nymphing, when they go to set the hook, they're either way too soft or way too hard. And he was just on the money. It was like, what? And so I was just this personal net guy all day. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, good for you. That's really cool when you can share it with somebody like that, especially like your father-in-law, you know, where elk hunting may not be his deal anymore, so it's like fun that he can come to Montana and come hang with you and come chase some trout around.
Yep, for sure, for
Yep.
sure.
Well, way cool. Well, dude, that's why I wanted to get you back on the podcast. I know I just had you on like a couple weeks ago, but like it's just fun to have you on because you know, you enjoy it and love it like I do, and then we can recap some of these fishing trips that we do, and it just like it brings it to the forefront of your mind, like the importance of a lot of the things that we do with the fly rod. So you're just a great guest. So thanks for coming back on again, man.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So so the reason I wanted to have you on was to talk about nymphing, like we give so much we talk so much about fishing streamers because we both love it, but gosh, everything's got to be right for those things as far as water temperature, the fish being grabby, the right flows, like and streamers, like there's this payoff where you keep doing the right thing and eventually you find a trout. But I think the most effective way to go catch a trout with a fly rod is to nymph. And I think you stated it on our last trip that it gives you the necessary skills to catch trout the other way. And so I never understand when I go with a guy that that isn't well versed in streamers and the drift and dead drifting, and it's technical too. Like you can be fishing right next to somebody with the same exact setup and catch half the trout or a quarter of the trout or even a tenth just by the way that drift comes down. So it's just so important that I wanted to have you on and do like an in-depth conversation to give the listeners, maybe some skills that they can take to the field.
Yeah, totally. And like that last trip we were on, it didn't take us very long to figure out that, hey, Nymphing was going to be the ticket. And it was kind of funny. It made me kind of chuckle because that first thought with that first run we stopped at, you're like, oh, you can nymph. And I was like, yeah, it's like, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people overlook. And it's like, for the first, when I very first started fly fishing, it's like, that's how I learned to fish. And it is, like you said, the most effective way to cover water and to catch fish. And it's like, if a guy wants to go out and catch fish, like, learn how to nymph. And it teaches you, where fish are holding, what fish are eating, what depth. And it's like, it's an absolute riot. I mean, we had a ball nymphing all day long. I don't think it didn't take us very long to put the streamer rod away that first day, because it was lower water, gin clear, and it was like nymphing was just the ticket.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, nymphing is so effective, and it's a good skill set to have. And yeah, that last trip, boy, we followed up that streamer trip pretty good. Like we were watching flows, and we were trying to hit some rivers. Like springtime is sure a fun time to chase fish, isn't it?
Oh, so much fun, and just so many ways to get them. And but yeah, following up our streamer trip, it turned into, we just kind of were adapting on the fly. And yes, it was just an absolute kick in the pants. I mean, I hadn't nymphed that hard in a long time, and my forearm was starting to cramp early because we were just into so many fish, man. And but yeah, it was so important, and that was kind of what we talked about too. You literally had to be perfect on those men's and get a drag-free drift, because you could run it over them if they're. I mean, it was super windy, but if you had any sort of belly in your line below your indicator, dragging those bugs, it was like those fish didn't. You could tell they just weren't even looking at it. And you could run it back over that same drift and be drag-free and be locked up.
Yeah, it makes such a difference, that drag-free drift, and you have to it's constant line management with nymphing. And so with the wind, it definitely adds like degree of difficulty. But Yeah, I mean the drift is you're looking for seams or runs where fish are sitting, and then able to throw in a perfect situation where you don't have the wind coming downstream, you throw upstream. And sometimes you can shoot a
Mm-hmm.
mend above your indicator there, or sometimes you can just kind of pull the slack as the indicator comes down and throw your first mend about even or 90 degrees at you. And when you throw that mend, you're throwing the line above the indicator so that the current can't pull that line or pull that belly that you're talking about. Because as soon as the water starts to pull that that indicator or pull your line starts to pull, it pulls those nymphs off the bottom. Like a drag-free
Mm-hmm.
drift allows your flies to get down to the bottom of the river and fish. And those, I've heard of fish liking things on a twitch, but as far as nymphing goes, like it is a dead drift for me. Like the deader the drift, like the more fish I catch. And then I think it's important too. Like I see, like the next skill with nymphing is to be able to get those fish that are way down below you. So to be able to cover water effectively. So instead of just drifting, 10 yards below you or 20 yards below you and doing another drift, you kind of stack your mends on top of that indicator. So you get your line going straight above the indicator, and then you feed it line. And you just feed it and feed it and feed it. And you can feed it all the way to your damn backing, like all the way down there, 100 yards downstream, or uh, what is a fly line? Maybe it's 100 feet downstream, but get these really
Yeah, yeah.
long drifts. And then you got to be good on the hook set. Like those, you talked about the hook set with your father-in-law, but man, especially when they get way down below you, like I'm trying to think of how to describe that hook set, but you got to get to that indicator and get to those flies to get those hooks buried in their face. So you're really watching that indicator, and sometimes the bite can be really subtle. And I think this is what people struggle with is that when you're nymphing, you will hit bottom. Like half the hook sets, or maybe three-quarters of the hook sets, are bottom. But every time that indicator goes down, you have to believe it's a fish and set the hook like it's a fish, or otherwise you get playing this game where you're trying to you're trying to help your drift downstream and it's bumping bottom and you don't set the hook and it's a dang fish on there, or you're just not getting hook
Yep.
set. So anytime it bumps, you got to set the hook on them. Yeah, but that those long drifts like way down below you, you kind of set the hook way up high and then strip to it to try to feel them. But man, we sure teed up this last trip. Like we were trying to find a good streamer river, and I actually got them pretty good in the early part of the week on a stream. And then like we're constantly watching flows and temperatures, and the flows jump from like well, it doubled in size, like doubled or even more so in size, and went chocolate mud. And so, like that just wasn't an option for us fishing that thing. So we actually fixed like a couple different systems. So one of my local systems, and man, we just hit 80. I don't know how many fish we caught that day, but it's so many rainbows. Like I don't like probably
Oh,
16 to 21-inch rainbows, like just all day long. And you actually got a good brown out of there too.
yeah, yeah. And those fish were so hot. Like, oh my gosh, just on fire. But going to, I mean, sticking with the nymphing real quick, talking about that, the mending, I think one thing that's really important, that maybe doesn't, cross people's mind, or at least a guy for the first few times out, it's important to, when you find out where the fish are sitting, mend before your bugs get there so you're not pulling your bugs off the bottom. Don't be trying to mend right on top of them, you know what I mean? It's like you want to cast your nymph setup up above them and get that mend so when you come through the zone, you're not mending on top of fish and, moving those bugs off the bottom or out of the zone. And I think that's pretty important. And I think, you and I kind of take it for granted. I think we kind of always set up our drift before it gets into that good water. And I just think that might be one of those things that a newer fly fisherman or a newer guy nymphing doesn't really think about. But yeah, I think that's super important. But
That's a
yeah,
good point,
yeah,
Dylan.
those.
Yeah, like staging up your drifts. You're so right. Like, 'cause when you
Yep.
throw that mend, it pulls your flies off the bottom. And there's some maintenance mending you have to do. And a perfect mend is to throw the line above the indicator, and the indicator never moves. To throw the perfect
Yep.
loop, perfect amount of power to throw your fly line above the indicator, and your indicator doesn't move. Too hard, you pull your indicator out of the water, flies come way up. Too soft, and you keep that little belly in your line and never get the drift. But you bring up a really good point of like setting up those drifts, like making that
Yep.
cast, and then like sometimes I like to throw another roll cast above it and just set up that drift so it's just free drifting or free floating, like when you're overfish in the heart of the hole. I think that's a real important part of that nymphing, and really nymphing, like the setup itself, it changes as well. And so like this is kind of funny. Like we fished a couple different systems, but we fished those couple different systems entirely different. Like so we fished this home
Yeah.
stretch that we're talking about now where we killed them. I don't know how many fish we caught, but it was all day long. We didn't see a boat. Did we see a boat?
No, I think no, I don't think we did. But yeah, I don't know how many fish. I think we passed one raft. We were hot lapping with one other raft, but it was like there was nobody on the water. But yeah, I don't. All I know is my forearm is still sore from that, and that just sounds. I did way too many pulls the day before, but it was. Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, you were giving me the hole to give your forearm a rest after a fish.
Yeah, what was so cool? I mean, so cool. I mean, we literally were fishing one rod. And one guy was the net guy, catch a fish, switch it over, and it's like another good point you made in that talking about nymph and that stretch is like it was a fish until it's a rock. It's like fish, 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 rock, or it's a trout, trout, trout until it's a Montana bonefish. Like you got to play it like you got what you want on the end of your net. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But yeah, so our setup on that river, we were fishing like a rubber legs, and then trailer fly on there, like gosh, I mean this time of
Mhm.
year, San Juan worm or serendipity or pheasant tail or like any of that stuff. A bead, I'll throw a bead on, like but yeah, like any of
Mhm.
that stuff right now this time of year. But the setup is like an indicator, and then it to get your flies down, like there's this technical side of nymphing that you have to know what a good drift is. And what a good drift is to drift all the way through the hole and maybe bump or touch bottom a couple times, through a drift. Maybe not every drift, but every couple drifts, like feeling the bottom a little bit. But too heavy and it gets hung up on the bottom and you never get a drift to where the fish are. Too light and your stuff is just rides too high in the water column and you don't get as many eats with those fish sitting low in there. And so like you have to find the right depth, but the deal is that every hole on the river is different. And so you have to come up with a setup that you can easily change or that's fishing well for that system. And so that day we were about 5 feet from our indicator to our weight. So that's like a heavier pound test. So like 4 to 5 feet to the weight right there. And then from the weight, we go 12 to 16 inches from the first bug. And when I'm talking weight, I fish really low weight. Like sometimes all I'll fish for my weight is my girdle bug and then a bug behind it, and that'll fish deep enough for me. On that day, I think we were running one weight on there at 4 or 5 feet, weren't we, Dylan?
Yeah, yeah, 1 to 2. Yeah, because I think we ran through that first run and we picked up some fish, and then we were like, oh, let's try and get down just a little bit because we were never ticking bottom, and we put on one more split shot. So yeah, I think we were kind of running 1 to 2, and I think they were just they were BB size split
That's
shot,
right.
right?
Yep, BBs.
Yep,
Yep. One to
yep,
two on there,
and
that's right.
yep, yeah, because that's what we were goofing around talking. It's like a guy told me one time the difference between a good nymph fisherman and just an average nymph fisherman is one extra split shot and a good mend.
That's the truth, man. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Okay, so like nymphing, you have to be able to fine tune your setup. And like I learned this, like I fish these tactics on steelhead as well, all over Pacific Northwest and places like that. Like those sea run rainbows would love to hit a dead drift. fly on a nymph setup. But yeah, you have to mess with your weight, and so you can adjust how your rig fishes two ways: by adding split shot, like Dillon just said, or by lengthening or shortening your leader. That'll also change the depth. So like that day, if we would have been fishing a 7-foot leader, we would have been fishing 0 weight or 0 to 1 weight. Instead, we were 4 to 5. Those are like the deeper runs that we ran, and so you got to be able to fine tune that setup for the system you're fishing. And we talk about, like, we got it good, really good that day. We about wore out our arm, and then the next day we went chasing browns, and so we went looking for different systems and ended up fishing a really small system. And when we got there, we showed up with our nymph setup that we just killed them the day before, but that nymph setup would not work on that system. It was just too big of an indicator. It was the bugs just weren't quite right, even though we had just killed them the day before. We had to go to smaller stuff. It was just a small gin clear stream, and so we actually ran no weight, and then we tried a few different setups, and I think like I can learn from this as well. So the next time out, we fished, I don't know, maybe 4 feet down to a bead head, and then down to a smaller bead head or trailer fly. I think we tried a serendipity. We tried, a few different flies, but we got in this system, and we could see fish laying in these holes because it was so gin clear and low, and they were big fish too. It wasn't like they were little small trout. It was like we had just watched, like the night before, I had got you hooked on like some of those New Zealand shows I had watched, and we went and did that same thing in Montana, which was really cool. But it was different flies that they were eating, less weight because they were smaller holes, and then being able to sight fish. But I think, and then we even took it a step further, and we went and ran a dry dropper. And squallows are coming off right now, so you can get a fish that may eat that dry. But really, you're looking for like a better presentation of the nymph, so you don't have this big indicator sitting over the fish. And you've got this dry fly that's a little bit more subtle. And then I need to be like, where I need to improve too is I'm so hooked on my ways, or I've been doing it for so long on these local rivers that I don't really adjust like my leaders too much. Like usually I go down to about 2x, which is about 10-pound test on my nymphs, and then I just fish it because fish just eat it. It doesn't matter in a lot of these rivers, but in some of these smaller systems that are gin clear, we did really well. We got into some fish. We caught some big ones. We actually got some fish on streamers on some still water towards the end of the day, which capped it off. But fishing those nymphs, that setup there, I think we could fine tune that more because we got into them. Both me and you started catching some really nice fish, and then we got into this run where there was a bunch of big fish sitting, and we could not. We spent half the day. We spent 4 or 5 hours in that hole, me and you, just losing our minds trying to figure out how to catch those fish. And as I think about it, taking a page from some of those New Zealand guys, like they're fishing 18-foot leaders. Now, that's in a lot of that bigger water, but they're fishing 18-foot leaders of clear line so that the fish aren't spooking from the fly line. So it's all clear line, and now they move their indicator. They're not fishing that long of a leader. They're only fishing 3 feet or 4 feet down to the fish, but their indicator is backed by all clear line. I think I need to take a lesson there, and then I also need to take a lesson. We did go down to 4x. That's what we caught fish on, 8-pound test or 7-pound test or whatever. But I think I wish I had a redo on that hole we came to that we struggled so bad, because I think I would have tried some different setups. I think maybe they were seeing our line in there or seeing our fly. There was something that was keeping those fish from eating. And you finally hooked one, which was the win for the day. But isn't it strange how these tactics, they change? And it's one of the reasons I like fishing with you so much, is like you have to be able to adapt. Like we went through our fly boxes, we tied about everything on, we made things work with a smaller indicator, and a lot of times the other thing is a lot of times those guys are fishing no indicators. Like they're just watching those fish eat it. And I've done that before too when I've sight fishing them for them. But that may have been a tactic that we could have used, is like take a page out of those Euro nymphers book, like fishing upstream and kind of pulling those nymphs down. But and I like an indicator. Like an indicator tells you when the fish eat it. Like I like it. But maybe in that gin clear scenario, like that could have been an adaptation that we could have done that would have caught us more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was, what was so cool right away when we first got in there, and then, after watching those New Zealand videos, it was like, no way, we get to do this at home, like sight fishing for big fish. And it was, right away. Well, we thought we had the money set up right away, because I walk up there and fish that one fish in that deeper slot. Boom, got him. And then we switch over, and then you saw that big brown laying in that soft edge, moved over, ate it. But then as we worked down, gosh, like you said, I would love to have a redo at that one section, because it's like we were sitting there watching that 22, 23-inch brown actively feed, and there was just something just a little off with our setup, to where he didn't like. I think he put it in his mouth a few times, but I think sometimes we were too long on our from our indicator to our bugs. I don't know. It's just, it was so much fun, and to fish to those fish, because it was challenging. And I mean, we finally hooked a couple. I don't think I put one to the hand, but it was a win just to get them to move and eat those bugs. But so much fun. And I think you're right on, because I came home and watched some more of those videos too. And it was like,
we're going to New Zealand, by the way.
Oh, dude, we are going. Yeah, we are going. And I think that longer leader, and then I want to say, I don't think I had any tungsten nymphs or anything like that. Just something that would get down, make a shorter cast in front of them, land a little closer to them, maybe 2 feet in front of them, but off. I feel like, I don't think we were lining them, because we were pretty good with, keeping our stuff off them. Maybe a few times we lined them, but it wasn't like we were spooking them. You know what I mean? They didn't really ever spook due to a cast. They just, something was a little off with them. But no, so much fun. I think we go do that a few more times, and I think we figure them out pretty good. I really do. But the payoff was the end of the day. Holy smokes.
It sure was. So, yeah, and another thing, like nymphing, I think that I need to be better at is I've got in such a habit, like on my local river that I fish, that we fished the day before where we killed them. Like, I just know the bugs that work, and I've been nymphing it so long, or long enough to know, when the fish are eating it, I have the bugs that they like, and when they're not eating it,
Yep.
It doesn't really matter what you put on. There's no magic. It's not a feeding time. Water temp isn't right. Whatever the case is. And so, like, I've gotten complacent in my nymphs, and I have a bunch of good trout candy, but I need to remember, like, what's hatching in the river, what nymphs are these fish eating, and be willing to go small, because small can catch some big fish as well, and you might just find exactly what they're feeding on. And so, like, it made me realize it on that new system when I start flipping through my bugs. And I hardly, I've got some size 20s and 16s and things of that nature, but my stock of those smaller flies has kind of gone downhill, as I just like to fish, in my local river. It's like, oh man, I fish a girdle bug size 8, and I fish a pheasant tail size 12, and I don't go any smaller because I don't need to. Sometimes a caddis nymph, those serendipities, will be a size 16 or something, but I need to go through my flies, and I need to make sure that I have everything in there, because fishing these new systems, you're not sure what you're going to run into. Now, that system, we saw some blue wing olives coming off. We actually saw them eat some dry flies too, but we went down there with a streamer rod and nymph setup. We could have retied for dry flies, but I didn't feel like they were eating enough of them to be like where we should tie one on and get them, and the bigger fish seem to be holding and feeding on nymphs, but we actually got them on smaller pheasant tails or pheasant tail variations that are like a mayfly nymph. So, and like I watched you do something that, I watched you rolling rocks, and rolling rocks is a big part of nymph fishing. Like, you get down there and you start looking under rocks, and you start looking for the nymphs that are active under those rocks, and it's a really good tell of what the fish are eating. Like, I know with that salmon fly hatch, like you start rolling over rocks, there's 10 stoneflies underneath every rock as they start crawling to the banks getting ready to hatch. And a lot of those things are getting washed down and those trout are eating them. It's one of the reasons why, in the Madison they eat a rubber legs or a girdle bug so well is because, there's so many stonefly nymphs in that river. The other thing is like fishing those bigger lead flies, like big leeches and girdle bugs and all even dead drift sculpins and things of that nature, is those bigger flies, they seem to really hunt for big fish. So like I think that's like an important piece of it too. But yeah, you really have to dial in your system, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah, and like we were talking yesterday, I took my father-in-law out, and he was brand new to fly fishing, fished his whole life, but just never fly fished. And on the drive home, I mean, he absolutely got him. And on the way home, he's like, how do you know what bugs or this or that? Just asking all the standard questions that someone that doesn't quite know would ask. Because I remember back to when I very first started, and it was like bug life and all that, and what nymphs. It was overwhelming. But like I was telling him, and it's exactly what you just said. When you get to know a piece of water, and I took him to my favorite piece of water on this river, and it's like when you get to know it, you fish the things that you have produced with forever and ever. And I mean, on those cold days, I know those fish always slack back into the back end of the runs. They're not all the way up in the head. I mean, the water temp, I finally got a thermometer, by the way.
Oh, good for
the water
you.
temp was 46 degrees, so it was a great temp. And but a lot of those browns were soaked back into the backside, and it's like they're going to eat something big. So, we threw on a big rubber legs, and I rolled a few rocks, and there was some betas, and so it was like we put on a size 16 pheasant tail, and it was like it didn't matter. And that's what he also asked, because I told him every time I tied it on, I told him like, hey, this is kind of what we're imitating, this is what it is. And I went from like a pheasant tail to a psycho prince to like some different variations. And he's like, well, does it matter? And I was like, no, this is kind of more of a natural, and this is more of just grab their attention. You know what I mean? And but it's so true. It's like you get into that, not, I wouldn't say rut, but it's just the things that work for you, and it's what you have confidence in. No different than streamer fishing. It's like when you're nymphing, you want to be fishing the things that, A, hunt for big fish, and B, that you believe in. And it's like, but it is good. I wish I would have had half a fly shop with me when we went to that other system the other day, you and I, because it's like, gosh, it was just like we were missing one little thing. Like it was just had to be. If we would have had that magic bug, I think it would have been insanity.
Oh, dude, it would have been insanity. That hole is crazy, those fish. Like you mentioned 22, but god dang, there was a lot of fish in that run that were 20 to 24. There was some big shadows in that thing. And we hooked a couple of them, and like that brown I caught, man, that thing went 22 easy. God, that was a pretty fish,
Yep.
So you're right. There was just something we were missing there. And I think that's going to be like going to these new systems. It's a lot of problem solving and trying to figure out what's going. So like, when we go to that New Zealand trip, it's going to be a lot of problem solving, and we better have everything in our bags to throw at them and be able to adapt to catch those things, So yeah, I think that's super important. So yeah, we fished those throughout the day. It was just this great weekend. We just killed them, and then you had to drive home that night, but we didn't cut it early. We went until it dang near got dark. We finally had to make ourselves quit, but then we went to some still water, which I think that's another thing that I need to get better at, is that still water holds really good fish. And like as soon as the ice comes off, those fish are really hungry. Dude, have you ever seen a fish so hungry as in that still water?
No, never in my life. That was so crazy. Like, I mean, I will never forget when you made your first cast in there and hook a 15-inch fish, fighting him, and here comes two 2-foot-plus-inch browns trying to eat the fish you have on. It was like, oh my God.
Oh,
my
dude, that was
God.
insane. I haven't seen fish attack a bug like that. I actually, yeah, I think I caught the 15 off the front, but uh, I throw it in there. It was a little, they were tough to hook. They were just swatting at it and swarming at it, but I've never seen so many fish try to eat a bug. They were trying to eat each other to eat that bug. But yeah, I mean, the first couple sessions through there with my bug and your bug, you throw it on the far side, and the minute that bug would hit the water and start sinking, there'd be fish attacking it, and they actually didn't hook real good. They were tough to hook. Like I got,
Yeah.
it's like 5, 6 casts and didn't hook a fish, but I think I had 25 fish eat it. Like they just were attacking that thing. And finally we started to get into a pretty good rhythm where they were swatting at it. We went back and forth, but yeah, I mean, me and you, we've caught some nice fish this season, but man, we put some nice fish to the bank. I think we put a couple to the bank that were like 24 that were just unreal. I mean, I just remember you laying on the
Unreal.
bank just laughing. It was like, man, oh man, we're just getting them. That was super fun, but boy, it lets you know how a big fish will fight too. Oh my gosh.
Figured it out. My headphones were dying.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I was,
Yeah, no, we're good now. I threw them on the ground.
perfect. I was
My
like, God,
bad, dude.
I thought it was my internet connection or something. I was like, oh man. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
we
we're
were
good
talking
now.
about catching those big fish, man. Those big fish could fight. You hook into a 24
Oh,
incher, you no longer have control. Like that thing would just zip around that hole, and you really have to wear them out. And then those big fish would hardly fit in the net too. You had to get them head first. We had some rodeos on the bank.
oh, we should have had the boat net. I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, zipping around, and it was like the guy with the net's like walking down the bank one way, walking down the bank the other way, like fish just zipping in, zipping out, zipping in, and then it's like when you go to net one of those big things with a wading net, it was like, oh my gosh, I know. I think we went. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but I think we went back to back to back to back, like 22 to 25-inch fish, and it was like you and I trying to net them with a small wading net. Just, oh man, so much fun. But yeah, we had to, I mean, stake absolutely corked to wear them out, and finally they would come up, and you could, I mean, there was no, I mean, I don't think we even really got to surf them in. It was like you had to make hero net jobs every single fish, but so much fun. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever laid on a mud bank laughing so hard, just like in disbelief, and it like I kept waiting for the magic to to just go away, and we literally just kept getting them.
We finally had to walk away. I mean, it kind of slowed down or whatever, but we've kindly finally had to walk away. But those are those fish that me and you dream about. Like those fish to me, they mean to as much to me as like a killing a big buck in the high country. Like I love chasing big brown trout. And the reality of the
Mm-hmm.
situation is we catch a lot of next level fish, which is really fun. We've had a great spring, both me and you, of next level fish. But
Yeah.
man, those 22 to 25-inch fish, those are the fish we dream about. And to be honest, like you don't see those fish every drift out. You don't see those fish every 10 drifts out. Like those fish are rare to find one of those. So it's really special to
Mm-hmm.
catch one. But then to go with your buddy and go to a spot where I think they're holding, and then to be able to toss out there, and both me and you catch those big fish that we dream about and get them in, back to back. Like I caught one of those giant fish, and I was like, oh man, I'm done for the day. Dylan's got to get his. And gosh, it wasn't but about 3 or 4 casts later, you had a big one that was bigger yet, or same size, like a big thick back. And it's like, well, I guess I'm back up to bat. I guess I'm throwing back out there to catch another one. But man, what a riot that. We have put together some good trips this spring, but that was definitely one of them, man. Just the best 2-day rip, but just nymphing and then streamers at the end in that still water. And so, like, I need to up my stillwater game as ice is still coming off right now in these different systems,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just such a good chance at big fish.
Yeah, no, and that's one part of my game that I don't even really have in the arsenal. It's like that was fun doing that, and it's like I just need to. It makes you realize it's like I need to get out and fish more still water, especially the ice coming off and early in the springs. I mean, still water grows big fish. And, yeah, it's one of those things that I just never really do. Cause over here on the east side, I mean, I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm not going to say I don't know where to go, but it's like, I guess I just haven't explored enough. I know there's reservoirs and stuff around here that hold big fish, but it's like I just haven't went out there and done it. It's just outside of, I wouldn't say my comfort zone, but it's like just something that doesn't usually cross my mind. But definitely that turned me on to it. I definitely need to put that in the arsenal and get out there and do some learning and figure it out, because heavy big fish can grow in those still waters.
Man, isn't that the truth? Heavy, big fish. God, there was just some beautiful specimens in there too. I mean, just the best coloration on them. Like some trout you catch, they'll be in different shape sometimes. It's like you can catch a big fish, but he may be a little dark or colored up, or like one of those big browns I caught looked like a eagle or a hawk. It kind of got the back of him. He had some sores that were healing up, but those fish that we caught out of that still water, they were the prettiest specimens of brown trout. Just none of them were skinny. All of them were so healthy. Their colors were insane. I posted that one picture of that ghost white one with those spots all the way down the side. That may be the prettiest brown trout I've seen all year. That thing was just beautiful, man. Those things, they keep in really good shape in those systems.
Oh yeah, that one that you caught, the one you're talking about, that thing was, I mean, the most gorgeous brown trout. I don't know if I've ever, that's the other thing that's cool about the spring. We've seen some fish like colorations and stuff like that are just like you don't see all the time. And that one you caught, like kind of ghostly white leopard spots, big spots, and super defined. And it was just, not to mention he was an absolute hammer of a fish, so it made it even better. Not very often. Usually I'm always like, oh, that's a pretty fish, like to a 16-inch fish, not like a 23-inch fish. Like, oh my Lord. But yeah, super, super cool.
It's pretty special when you catch a fish like that, and we hit it right that day where we caught a handful of fish like that. But it's pretty special when you hook and catch a fish that you're after like that you may have been fishing 20 different trips, and now you're finally landed that thing in the net, and you get to like bathe with them down in there. Just hold them and look at them a little bit, take a photo, and let them loose. But that bathing with big brown trout, man, that is so fun. It's so surreal, to sit there with this trout that you just dream about, that gets that big, that's the alpha of the species. Just an absolute riot, man. I love chasing these trout. I'm glad I got you as a fishing buddy to go to all these different systems, and I just want to continue to evolve and learn and go to these different systems. I saw, the river that we were going to fish is coming back into shape. So it's back into back into the banks and back into that CFS we want. And so what we're doing as well is we're watching the flows of these rivers. And then a lot of these stations on these rivers, not only do you have the flow, but they'll also give you the temperature on these rivers, which is really handy. It seems to me like that streamer bite seems to be, and I caught some streamers this winter, like you get it by the right fish or you fish it deep and they'll eat it. But really to get them good on those streamers, you want about 45 to 50 degree temperature, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and especially in the spring, I mean, like you and I talked about, I think in the wintertime, I mean, we fish streamers hard, and you just got to, I mean, they're not as active, but if you put it by the right fish in that, I fish a lot of water around here that's in that 38 to 41 range in the wintertime, but definitely 45 to 50, that's when fish get grabby and start chasing, and that's when it really gets fun. And but yeah, no, totally agree.
Well, we had an epic trip before the last podcast that we did. We've actually had a few epic trips this spring. Like, I don't even think we've talked about all of them. So this is the latest one. But yeah, we actually met in the middle of winter on a system that you like to fish. You took me there, and then man, we got them to eat streamers so good in that thing. In that water, like it barely got above freezing that day. I can't imagine. That water was so cold, but those fish, they were sure hungry and sure wanted to eat a streamer. I mean, although I look for those temperatures like around on these systems to go fish streamers because I know they're going to get grabby and going to eat it good, you're right. I mean, winter, even cold conditions. God, me and Charlie had an epic day on a streamer that I don't think it got above freezing that day, and that was on my home system. We got them really good. So like sometimes they just eat it in that cold weather as well, but you're definitely going to catch less trout. Like the magic temperature, magic range for that, when they get grabby and start chasing it and you catch more fish, and a better chance to have one of those epic days is like that 45 to 50 degree temperature. I'm glad you got a thermometer. That's stupid we don't have one between us, but we do look at so many of these sites that will give us flow and temperature, so we've got a pretty good idea what the temperature is. But yeah, that's smart, Dylan.
Yeah, and it's just something that a couple other guys that I fish with have them, and it's like you and I always have a real educated guess of what the temp is if there isn't a temp gauge, on USGS, and it's like. But like yesterday was cool because that river I was fishing didn't have a temp gauge, and I checked the flows from like recent years past. That's why I knew it was good to go to my spot, because it was the exact same flow that I got them like 2 years ago. So it's like money, but it was cool to see. It's 46 degrees. There wasn't a overcast. Air temp was cool, so there wasn't a ton of like surface activity. There wasn't a lot of bugs hatching. But it was just cool to see, what fish were moving in, where those fish move back to. So if I get out one of these sunny days, maybe this weekend on Saturday, it's supposed to warm up. It'll be interesting to see how much that affects, just that ambient temperature affects the water temperature. So it'll be kind of cool. Yeah, I'm pumped to have one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's a big part of this game too, is like these places that we're going, and exploring a lot and going to new systems. I know I fished some new systems this year as well, but a lot of this it is our journal. And nowadays, like you don't need to keep a written journal so much. Like my phone is my journal, and so my phone will tell me when I caught big fish or when I had that epic day, because it's got all the dates, that I caught that fish. And then a practice that I use that I know you use as well, I may even got it from you, Dylan, is like taking a picture of the flow that day that you got them. So you have this, this catalog that you can look back in your phone and go, oh God, we got them last year on that system really good. What was the dates of that? Look back and say it's April 15th that I caught that fish, oh man, April 15th. You can actually go back and look at flows from that date, or you just take a picture of that flow that good day, and then you look through your pictures of fish, and then you also have this picture of the flow and the temperature that it was at in all these conditions, because, it can be give or take 2 weeks or even 3 weeks with different conditions in Montana or these western states, how that river will affect. But if you have that flow, you can look back and go, man, I got it when it was 1600 CFS and it was 48 degrees. Let me find that again. And it might not be the exact same day, but within inside a couple weeks, if you can hit that timing again, then you show up and it's like your magic, like you get that same really good fishing. So much of this great fishing out west on these streams is timing. Like you can fish the best river in the world, but if your timing's off, you can get blanked on that thing. But if your timing's right, you see magic. And not everybody, like there's a lot of guys that are fly fishing nowadays, especially these public waterways, and so like fishing pressure is a real thing, and it's a real discussion to have. And when there's more boats going down, they get those first fish that are looking to eat, and so fishing pressure is real. But the thing that guys don't have is they don't have the timing on these systems. So even though we're fishing really popular systems, like our timing is perfect on them, where we fished one of the most popular rivers in Montana, and we saw one boat. Like that timing is perfect, and the fish were all eating it. But that comes from years of knowledge and keeping that log, that backlog, so you can look back on it. And then too, like you start to understand why those fish are eating it and why they're eating it that flows, why that timing works on that system. And then you can start to transpose that information and start to make educated guesses at different systems in the area and when they're going to fish good, and try to time those right and get on those. So it's such a big part of the game, and that's the reason why we've had such epic fishing this spring. It's not it's not like we're just getting lucky on these systems. Like we know they're going to fish good because we fished them before around those times and around those flows.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and I mean, this spring and even those winter trips that we had, it just is like the perfect culmination of exactly what you said. It's years of fishing these systems and knowing that, hey, this is when it's going to work and this is when it's going to be good. The fish are going to be in this kind of water. I mean, from those early or late winter trips that you and I had, to our first few spring trips now. And it's like, it's years, I mean, countless days and hours, countless of just experience and learning it. I mean, that's what was so cool about fishing that first day with you. It's like you knew that river inside and out. And it's like, that's what I think I told you. I was like, if I would have came down this river without you, I would have been fishing some totally different stuff. And it's like, but once I saw, you kind of schooling me, hey, look left, seeing that water. And then it's like towards that middle of the day before I forget the name of that money hole, but before that, it was like I saw some like different pockets, and it was like put those nymphs in there, boom, and it's like, okay, now I'm starting to understand it. But it's just, years of experiences put us into these situations, this year, and that's probably, we're just really taking advantage of all of the days, the hours, the time spent on the water, and now we're just teeing it up and just hitting it out of the park. And it's like, yeah, like we always say, like, yeah, we're going to get blanked, but the odds are, shifting, or they're more in our favor. Like on the days that we go out, like looking back and seeing, oh, it was this flow today. Oh, it's only 5 CFS off of this. It's 52 degrees and it should be good to go get them. So yeah, there's no substitute for being on the water and having that experience to look back and recall and then give you a good educated guess. It's a little bit more educated than bro science, so it works out.
I love the bro science though.
I do.
Yeah, and it's like attacking that river tactfully, like like our approach to that river, like you talk about knowing the river well, like I know all the biggest holes on the river, all the biggest holding water. And so like our approach to this, when we were fishing that system, like we were going down fishing out of the boat looking for fishy spots, and we were getting them out of the boat. But really where we made our money that day was stopping at big holes and big runs. And so we've got a couple different tactics we'll use. Like a lot of times if you catch a fish, like in a tail out or in some soft water, like that there's fish laying in there. Fish don't live by themselves. And so a lot of times that's where you'll pull over, and then you'll work that run with multiple drifts. And in the wintertime or even spring fishing, like not every fish eats at every drift. Like a lot of these seams and runs that we're fishing, we'll stop, and you may run 5-6 drifts and not get a fish, not find the sweet spot of the run. But eventually, after a dozen drifts or 16 drifts, you start to find them, and then you start to key in on them, and you'll get them pretty good. But a couple of the tactics we use are pulling over and then working that run, especially this time of year, working any big runs any time of year, really, even summertime or whatever it is being able to recognize these really big runs and pull over and then work them from the bank all the way from top to bottom with a bunch of different drifts down. So that really works good for us. The other thing that works good is the row around. And I use this, like the system we were going to go fish, I went and fished with Dad like the Sunday before you came, and we got him pretty good off streamers. But we would run that row around, and then you run it a lot on your systems. We've ran it all spring.
Yep.
But basically you get down from the run and then row your way up the soft water or jump out and just pull the boat up and then drift back through it. And we'll do this recycle. And sometimes if it's a good run, we'll recycle it a half dozen times or 5 times where we'll do that row around. So I think it's important, like the way you approach water, because even that first day, if we just would have planned our drift differently, where we didn't stop at all those good runs, we wouldn't have caught nearly the fish, maybe a quarter of the fish. But it was stopping in those good runs where they were all holding and then really working those runs. And then working the good in-between water, as we're drifting down and looking for that same type of water. But stopping at those big runs, row around in those big runs, like those big runs, you know you're fishing over fish. You know those fish live down there, and you know big fish live down there. And so you can just have the confidence that you're throwing your flies by fish. And so it can actually give you a way to test your setup as well. You get in a good run that you have confidence in, that you know fish are sitting in. If you're not catching anything with your nymph setup, like that's a good time to change it over. Where going down in the boat, you don't always know if you're fishing over fish, in every run. So I think that's like an important part of our tactics that we use.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Fishing it through, maybe changing a bug out every once in a while. Like fish it through, change a bug out, or change depth, add weight. I mean, that very first run, it was the very first run of the day that you and I hit. I hooked into the biggest fish that I hooked into all day, and we both got to see him. And it's like he came out of the water, but it was going to be I think we were packing up to get back in the boat and go. And it was the last drift I was running through. And it was probably oh, good Lord, maybe the 50, 60th drift we ran through that run. And it was like, just got a little different look at it, different seam. I mean, that bug might have just got down, but it was like, we worked those runs and those holes and those tail outs so hard. And it just goes to show you just got to really, really stick to it and, change stuff up, because it's like, I don't know who I heard this from, but it was on, it might've been on social media or whatever, but it was like, nature doesn't like a void. And meaning in a river or, an elk spot, if it's an A+ spot, there's gonna be fish in it. There's gonna be elk in it. Now, maybe not every time, but like, I really, really like that nature doesn't like a void. So like when we were stopping at those A+ spots, we knew fish were going to be in there. It was like, that's why we pull the boat over, really work it. Because if we go by it on the drift, we won't run one drift through there and, say you're clinking bottom or, have a little belly, don't get the right mend. It's like you blow by that spot and you just passed up, or we could have been passing up, in some cases 10, 12 fish a run, So I really like you said that, and I never really thought about that. That's a huge tactic, and I love getting out and fishing on my feet. A lot of the biggest fish, I mean, I think you and I catch we are on our feet wading, and that's huge. Being able to stop, work over a run, roll around, it's just so effective. And you really, when you get back in the boat, you feel like you covered it the best you could.
Yeah, you feel like you got it, don't you? Like, you just work that run from your feet, and like it takes going out of a boat, like both guys are working together to get the front guy adrift. And so the guy on the sticks is trying to keep up with the indicator and keep his guy close, but not too close where you're spooking fish. And so it's really a combination of two guys fishing, and it's easier. It's like why these guides run people down rivers in the front of these drift boats, because a lot of times it's the guy's skill behind the oars that catches those people fish, along with his instruction and then the front guy doing the right things. But it's a lot easier to cast as you don't, have trees behind you. You're elevated in the water, standing up, looking at it. You get such a good toss to the water, and you need to use that and catch fish out of the boat, and that teaches you where fish are living and which runs to work. But really where you make your money is stopping that boat and working those runs. And so like sometimes you catch a fish out of a run and pull over, or sometimes it just looks like a good run and it's like, hey, let's stop and work this. Now, it's not as easy to get those good drifts from the bank line. It takes more skill. It takes more line management and knowing your rod and your cast in the water, being able to cast farther, drift longer. And so it takes like a higher level of skill, but it's like you can really work the water and work all the different lines that those trout can be in. So when you're stopped on the bank, it's not just throw it out as far as you can throw it and get a drift. It's like working all these lines. You work right underneath your rod tip a lot of times, real close to you for a drift, and then you work out a couple feet, work for a drift, work out a couple feet, work for a drift. And then maybe you'll throw on another weight and you'll throw it out into the heat of the run where it's going a little bit quicker and you'll get some drifts out there. But it's really working all those different lines with that nymph setup. It's not just working the seam. Like they can be laying in there anywhere. And during this winter and then springtime fishing, it's colder water, and these fish, they won't move as far for bugs. And so a lot of times they're just sitting in the run waiting for easy food to come by them. And so, like, you can run a drift that's 6 inches by them and they don't eat it, but all of a sudden you run a drift that's right on them and they eat it. And that's why you can catch a fish on the 60th drift through there. You've got the bugs they want to eat, but it's not always the drift that they want to eat, or it doesn't always come right by them. And so it's real important to work all those different lines that those fish can be in and really change up your drift from inside to outside and everywhere in between. And then, like you say, then when you get in the boat and you've worked this run from top to bottom, inside to out, you know you covered it. Like, if there was a fish in there that wanted to eat your stuff, you probably gave him the right drift.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And in those runs, looking for, like, when it's a little bit early in the spring like this, looking for those soft spots is huge. That, and like you said, that's why you can catch one on the 60th drift through there, because it's like you might move back up to the head of the run, look back down there, and then see, oh, there's a soft pocket right there. Like, there's a big submerged boulder that I couldn't see from this angle, and I got to get a good drift through there and, like, really target that spot. And yeah, you're right. It's like sometimes you got to put it right in front of their face, and it's just really dissecting those runs and really looking at it. And that's why I really enjoy nymphing too, is because it's like you can really dissect a riffle, a run, whatever it may be. You can, if you stop and don't look at it as a whole and start following currents, because, like, in that system, there was a lot of different little micro currents, on the softer edges and stuff like that. And it's like, we caught a lot of fish out of that stuff. And it's like, but I mean, I think we take it for granted now, but just the way that we look at water, but it's like, that's so important when you roll up to a piece of water, not just to start blind casting, break it down, look at, hey, this is going to be the most likely spot, and then target your first few drifts. And like you said, starting at your feet is huge, because and that's one thing you reminded me that day. I got so gung-ho watching you catch the first couple, and it's just like, start at your feet and start there, and then work your way out through the run. And yeah, it's important.
Yeah. You mentioned soft water in there. I think that's so important in the winter and the spring. And me and you read water so well, and I think that's, why we catch a lot of fish, is like, it comes, like, all these skills have to come together to catch fish. It's not, it's not always about leader length and weight, even though we talk about that. Like there's so many factors that come in. It is leader length, it is weight, but it's also like reading water. Reading water is one of the best skill sets you can have. And, like, in these colder temps, like that soft water you're talking about, the soft inside. Like, a lot of people don't fish this soft inside corner of the run, and they'll be in there all summer long too, even when the water warms up. It's just good feeding lanes. But those soft inside, that nervous chop, that real slow water where those fish can sit in there in the wintertime and sit at the bottom and not use much effort. And so, like, coming down this river, a lot of times we gravitate towards the deep water bank or the hard water bank, and there's pocket water that sits on the side. But I mean, the reality is, this time of year, that's not where they're sitting. They're not sitting on that hard water, deep water side. Like, that's more of a summer ambush spot. Like, there's starting to be some fish move to them, but for the most part, they're stacked on the inside or on the soft water of that thing. And so, like, going down in the river and being able to realize that, then which side to fish. You're not going to fish that heavy water side in winter or early spring because they don't live there. You're going to fish that soft water and target those fish in that soft water. So just, like, having an understanding of the water and where the fish want to be, and then being able to read water, I think, is one of the best skills you can have. Like, if you can really read water, you can go to any system and figure it out, and it's one of the things that you're really good at, is reading water, and also, picking up on where fish are eating, where you get bites and where you hook fish. Pay attention to where you hook those, and be able to transpose that water to other places in that system or other places in that river. Once you can start to recognize where you're catching trout, you'll catch way more trout because you'll target those spots and those locations. You'll be able to see it 2 bends down the river. Oh, hey, this looks like that inside bend that we fished up and through here. Let's stop at this spot and work it. Or, let me fish this spot inside because it looks really good. But, yeah, I think it's one of those skill sets that's developed over time that's so important to consistently catching trout.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And to like maybe someone who's newer to this and like doesn't know where to start with reading the water, because it's like it can be an overwhelming thing if you don't know what you're looking for. When I very first started, I was explained to it by the guy who owned the fly shop. He's like, look at it as like a buffet line, like a conveyor belt, and he goes, a fish holding in current is expending energy. So if they're holding in current, they've got to eat. So the best spot to eat, if you dropped, I don't know what the analogy was for it, but basically to imagine the food, which obviously nymphs and everything floating in the current, read that current, and that's, where is the fish going to get fed directly? The other thing that was explained to me is like, when they have to if they're holding in current, they're expending energy. So if they need to take a rest, obviously they're going to slack into some softer water or behind a boulder or stuff like that. When I think you and I experienced this in the wintertime, when there's a good hatch going, sometimes they slide into some softer water, some skinnier water to pick off, those midges at that time. But when it was explained to me, it's like when I was new, to look at a run like a conveyor belt of food. It was like, oh, okay. Like if the food is in there, where is it going? And that's one of those things. And it's like, okay, that bank's a little heavy, so it's probably a trout's going to hang on the inside. He doesn't have to use as much energy to go eat his food, So, but yeah, that is, in my opinion, I would say, I mean, granted, everything matters, but reading water and learning to read water, paying attention to where you catch fish, I mean, is, in my book, is one of the most, if not the most important thing. So it's like taking time to dissect the river is huge.
Absolutely. Man, we're so lucky where we get to live. You on the eastern side of the state, me on the western, but just this western fly fishing and targeting big brown trout and being able to see all this different water and different systems, different adventures, like, man, I just absolutely love it. I love being on the water, and man, we're just so fortunate for the opportunities we have. And then I'm fortunate that I got a good fishing buddy that at the drop of the hat will drive across the state to go fish a system, So I really enjoy fishing with you, Dillon. We've had a bunch of good trips under our belt now, and then I know there's a bunch more to come in the future and a bunch of big fish and laughing on mud banks to come, So, man, I can't wait for the next one, and I really appreciate you as a friend, and then also coming on the podcast and sharing information. You do so well on here.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I appreciate you too. It's always an absolute riot when we get together, and it's like, no, I appreciate you. You'll drop the hat as fast as I will to come fish over here. So it is just so much fun to fish with you and I just like-minded, and yeah, appreciate you as a friend, and yeah, I'll come on and talk fishing anytime you want me to. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Alrighty, we got to put the next trip together, but thank you. We'll keep in touch and start planning for that next one.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Again, one of my favorite people out there, Dillon Ness. Guy's just an animal with a fly rod or a bow in his hands, but just great to have him on the podcast. We got such a great friendship and connection that it really comes out over the airwaves. We both get each other fired up, which makes for a fun conversation. But yeah, we absolutely got him on that last trip. It's just been epic springtime fishing here. I've been out like a madman. Last night, went overcast, nice and warm, and I found this dry fly hatch on Friday. I actually had to walk away from it. I was catching so many good trout on a dry fly, and I was late getting home, or I would not say where I'm late, but I was to the minute of getting home to make a softball game. It's just absolutely awesome. But went back last night, had more time. Everybody was off the river and found this Betis hatch. And man, I stuck so many nice brown trout like on a dry fly, watching them come up and eat that thing, just amazing. And fishing lighter tippet than I normally do, small dry fly, so fishing that Betis, fishing 4X, and just feeding those trout and watching them come up. But I mean, just a bunch of nice trout in between 18 and 21. I'll post one up on the Flycast social media so you guys can see it and kind of tag it as a dry fly eat. But a couple epic dry fly days. I thought about it last night, and I think I fished 7 or 8 different rivers this spring. Caught the squala dry fly hatch. I've seen Baetis and the blue wing olive dry fly hatch. I got streamers on Saturday. I forgot about that. I went over and fished this new river I've been fishing with my dad that's just this great brown trout fishery, and the water temp gets right and they eat streamers really well, and so I've kind of got my dad hooked on that. And so we caught some nice brown trout on Saturday, but man, just really enjoying this spring season and getting after them and looking forward to summer. And there's just so many great adventures and great rivers to go explore. And so, man, I'm just having an absolute blast. And having an absolute blast sharing it with you guys. Seen some really good fish this spring, and yeah, I just want to continue to get after it here. So it went north wind and cold and snowing today, so I don't think I'll see much of a dry fly hatch. But I bet you later this week it'll go off again. I mean, the first day I found it, it couldn't have been more than 45, 50 degrees and just overcast, and they went off. Now, last night when I got it, it was like 55, 60 degrees. But I think there's some more really good hatches to come off on that river. So can't wait. Just having fun putting together this podcast and sharing it with you guys. So appreciate the support and the comments on like iTunes and things. Really helps out because it just helps introduce us, or like all of a sudden the algorithm will just start working and they'll start pushing our podcast to other guys that fly fish. As of right now, like you guys that listen to the podcast are guys that have found me mostly through the hunting side of things. And so yeah, just trying to get the word out and get support for this podcast so we can keep it going. It's tough to build a podcast in today's market, as there are so many good podcasts out there, and we're just trying to stand out and give you guys good information and have you guys believe in the podcast and keep it rolling. And so yeah, just gonna work hard and try to keep lining up good guests and good conversations, and hopefully it connects with you guys and you guys are getting on the water. I know we're just coming into primetime season, and there's just so much fun to have out west exploring these rivers. So thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. I mean, if you listen this far, it means you listen to the whole podcast, and I just appreciate each and every one of you. So thanks so much. And with that, we'll check in with you here in a couple weeks.